Time for questions, and please raise your hand to ask short questions. And I see one, two, and please say to whom you address your question. For all the speakers. And please, speakers, please, if you would be able to come here, sit in front of the audience. Yes, please. So, proceed.
Lietuvos žmogaus teisių stebėtojų sąjunga. Klausimas būtų daktarui Stasiui Motiejūnui. Kaip mes matėme iš skaidrių iš pristatymo, kuris buvo mums parodytas, dabar statomos saugyklos yra 100 000 kvadratinių metrų. Tai praktiškai, sakykime, taip, kilometro ilgis, 100 metrų pločio. Tai mes visi turbūt čia esantys suprantame, kad šita saugykla yra skirta praktiškai importinių radioaktyvių atliekų saugojimui. Ar mes teisingai supratom iš jūsų skaidrės, kam būtent skirta, kad būtent bus saugomas radioaktyviosios medžiagos, kurios bus ne lietuviškos kilmės. Ačiū už atsakymą.
Čia buvo testas. Ar jūs pastebėsite, kad vietoj kubinių metrų yra parašyta kvadratiniai metrai? Ten, atsiprašau, turėjo būti 3, bet ne 2. Žodžiu, aš pasakiau kubinius metrus.
Bet tai tas kiekis vis tiek pakankamai didelis, sakyčiau.
Kiekis, kodėl toks didelis kiekis? Visų pirma, todėl, kad Lietuvoje mes turim RBMK reaktorių. Tai yra tas pats, kai palygintumėt dabartinį modernų vakarietišką traktoriuką su staliniecu. Tai yra iš tikrųjų labai didelis reaktorius, didelis geometrinį savo formą. Ir atliekų jame susidaro labai daug. Tai viena. Antra, ten bus laidojamos apdorotos atliekos, tai yra konteineriuose. Apdorojant atliekas, supakuojant į konteinerius, jų tūris irgi gerokai padidėja iki poros kartų. Tai va tokių apdorotų atliekų tikimasi, kad Ignalinos atominėje elektrinėje bus virš 90 000 kubinių metrų. Ir jokių atliekų neplanuojama laidoti iš kitų šalių.
Ačiū, sekantis klausimas.
Maybe a remark on this question. Is it okay? No, maybe a remark on this question. Mr. Matthäus mentioned that in the Radioactive Waste Directive, which was decided on last July by the European Commission, there is the possibility for regional disposals opened within the EU. There are several countries that have pushed for it, and this shows that radioactive waste is not just a question of trying to find a technical and engineering solution, but it's also subject to extreme political pressure. There are several countries in Europe that consider themselves too small to be able to solve this problem, or consider that they don't have the proper underground. It's an argument that's sometimes used by the Netherlands, sometimes used by Slovenia, and they want to keep the option open to combine the efforts among several countries. Why do I call this also political pressure? Because this inevitably will lead. We've seen it already for the existing power stations, or for the existing disposals, where the sites chosen was severely influenced by where there was the least public opposition. It's not by coincidence that in Finland Olkiluoto is chosen, where there are already nuclear power stations. Olkiluoto didn't even feature on the list of most suitable geological spaces. The same is for Forsmark. Both these sites have been added later, when it was impossible to find any municipality willing to take up nuclear waste. If we looked at a European storage, a regional storage, my fear and the fear of many others is that will go to the country with the least resistance. And I understand that you are scared that Lithuania might become such a country. The plans for now don't foresee that. I think that's important to notice, and I think it's important to stand on that, to keep that also active in the minds that Lithuania does not want to become the regional depository for more countries. I had two questions, one for Mr. Beyer and one for Mr. Motiunas.
Please be short, because we are running out of time, and our interpreters also need to finish the jobs on time.
Mr. Motiunas, you said there is basically consensus about the fact that deep geological disposal is the best solution. Do you agree with me that that is only a consensus among those people working on geological deep disposal? We've seen not only in the other presentations, but also in the whole discussion leading up to the directive, that there are doubts about this, that whether it will be feasible at all. And secondly, you also indicated yourself that there are other options that have not been sufficiently researched. Dry disposal is one of them, dry rock disposal, the other one, deep boreholes. And the Scottish government is now looking into more engineered near-surface storage. Do you still stand with that conclusion that there is consensus, or do you agree that there are also other opinions there?
Na, dėkui už įdomų klausimą. Aš vis tik pasilieku prie tos pačios nuomonės, kad kito sprendimo nėra. Šiandien kitos galimybės bent nėra. Tai yra arba giluminis kapinynas, arba giluminiai gręžiniai. Papildoma alternatyva yra perdirbimas, tačiau tai nėra visiška alternatyva. Nėra alternatyva ir laikinas saugojimas. Galbūt ateityje pasikeis situacija, bet šiandien ne.
Very shortly, reprocessing is not a solution. Reprocessing
It's not a solution.
It's a volume reduction maximally, and it is emitting enormous amounts of radioactive fluids into the oceans and rivers, and obviously not into the air, cryptid in the air. We were not very happy with what is happening in La Hague and South Africa. Question to Mr. Beyer. You've talked about Mosleben, you've talked about Godleben. I understood there were also experiences that were not so fortunate with another low and medium radioactive waste disposal in Germany.
Yes, I guess you're talking about Asse 2. Asse 2? Yeah. Yeah, it's also an old salt mine, which was used nearly at the same time when the GDR was starting the Mosleben repository, and it has similar problems. But it's better known, obviously even internationally, than Mosleben, because of the big amount of scandals that have been published during the last maybe 2 years. And they have the problem that they have a big amount of water which is penetrating the rock. They are about 11,500 liters per day. And the operator fears that the whole rock, the whole mine will be flooded soon. That's an option which could happen soon. And yes, scandals connected to this place are, for example, that the operator was bringing illegally high-level radioactive waste there. That they were bringing like bodies of dead people. There were people who suffered radiation accidents. That pieces of these bodies were stored downstairs there because the radiation was too high to leave them on the surface, and even the families didn't know about that. And officially, of course, there was no license for this kind of storage of whatever. And there's a big number of these small scandals. I guess the biggest scandal is that they called it a research mine all the years, and actually they brought about 100,000 barrels of nuclear waste there to help the nuclear industry to get rid of the problem, of the unsolved problem of their nuclear waste produced in the nuclear power plants. Is it fine?
Maybe good to also remind that 126,000 barrels will have to be removed there. And they're trying to do that at this moment. The cost, official cost marking at the moment is 6.4 billion euros for that. But that is one where the operator says that is the current first estimate, but we expect it to become higher. I just want you to be aware of those kind of costs. If we talk about Mosleben, we're talking about backfilling at the moment, costs at the moment, estimated at 2 billion euros. We're not talking anymore about the 100,000s. And at the moment that I see the about 2 to 3 billion euros, the 7 to 9 billion litas for final storage in Lithuania, I think we also count with a relatively low estimate in that case. Thank you.
One thing, if you don't know what to do, which I hope has been obvious through the talks here, you don't know how to make a safe repository for 100,000 years or for 1 million years or whatever time period. So if you don't do it, know it. Don't do it. Simple as that. We have to have a time referendum to see what happens in the future. And during that meantime, we have to find something. It has to be deposited in a place where it is cannot be get unwanted accessibility, but in a for control and any kind of future utilization or movement of the waste. That's another thing. So therefore, this you could call it interim, but that's also a way not to talk about it. But even as what I'm talking, dry rock deposit, if you find the right place, and there are much better places in Sweden where there have not been any erosion, any changes, any damage, even of Cretaceous deltaic material. It's been 100 million years old, 80 million years old deposit. That's a place where even I could build even a dry rock deposit, which is much superior to those things in Forsmark and Olkiluoto, where the bedrock is really very bad for a long deposit. But it was chosen, as has been said here, for other reasons. Usually there were municipals which needed something. So don't do anything if you don't know how to do it. Simple as that.
Some more questions, the last ones, and we would like to finish.
Labai trumpas klausimas, kaip nelabai trumpas, stacijimo teiginiai visgi būtų. Aš jūsų taip kaip lietuvių norėčiau paklausti. Vienas dalykas, kaip jūs pats kaip lietuvis, ne kaip atliekantis šitą darbą. Kaip jūs pats reaguojate, kaip jūs manote, ar visuomeniai buvo pateikta pakankamai duomenų apie geologiją, planuojant būsimas giluminės saugyklas? Ir ar iš tikrųjų kas nors visuomenės iš tikrųjų realiai informavo pilnai apie tai, kokių sąlygų reikia, ir ar visuomenė iš tikrųjų buvo paklausta ir išklausyta, ar tai įmanoma daryti. Mes esam maža tauta. Šalis mūsų labai nedidelė, mes neturim tos laisvos vietos. Ir kiek aš žinau, geologija Lietuvoje yra būtent labai komplikuota. Vat jūs dabar ne kaip dirbantis tą darbą, vat pats kaip lietuvis. Ačiū.
Lietuvis tai kokią kalbą reikėtų atsakyti? Žemaitiškai ar dzūkiškai? Į visus klausimus aš galiu atsakyti ne. Nes Lietuvoje nei sprendimas priimtas, nei yra vieta išrinkta. Tai yra tik aš apžvalgą pirmiausiai padariau, kas yra pasaulyje ir kokios galimybės yra Lietuvoje. Apie Lietuvą aš praktiškai nieko nekalbėjau savo pranešime. Apie giluminį kapinyną aš tikrai nekalbėjau Lietuvoje. Aš kalbėjau apie paviršinius 2 kapinynus, kuriem vietos yra parinktos ir kuriem kurių projektai yra vieno baigiamas rengti, kito pradėtas rengti. Tuo atveju taip, informacija buvo pateikta ir yra teikiama.
Ar galima dar vieną klausimą?
Prašau.
Labai trumpa. O sakykite, Ignalinos uždarimo dokumentuose, kai Lietuva pasirašė uždarimo dokumentą su Europos Sąjunga, ar buvo numatyti kažkokie tai darbai ir kaip tai moksliškai buvo pagrįsta ir koks finansavimas buvo skirtas būtent tų visų kabinynų, saugyklų įrangai įrengimui. Jeigu tik tai dabar daroma apžvalga ir ieškoma kažkokiu tai išeičių, tai kaip tada buvo pasirašomi dokumentai Ignalinos uždarimui, tai yra stojant į Europos Sąjungą. Ačiū.
Taip, į Ignalinos eksploatavimo nutraukimo programą įeina tokie darbai. Visi esate turbūt girdėję, daug girdėję apie projektą B1, tai yra panaudoto branduolinio kuro saugykla, sauso tipo, konteineriuose, 50 metų, oranžiniuose konteineriuose. Tai vienas komponentas. Taip pat kitų dviejų mano minėtų kapinynų statyba. Šie projektai atsirado šiek tiek vėliau, bet jie yra programoje. Ne statyba, projektavimas, projektų parengimas šitų kapinynų. Kas yra dar? Atliekų tvarkymo, apdorojimo įrenginys. Jis yra eksploatavimo nutraukimo programoje. O giluminio kapinyno tikrai nėra programų.
Papildant jūsų atsakymą.
I'm sorry, but I had my question already previous section.
Sorry,
And I
we'll refer to, just will help to respond to this question, okay? Just the response will be following. The previous, I will switch to Lithuanian, please use the headphones. Buvęs valstybinės atominės saugos inspekcijos viršininkas, ponas Saulius Kutas, gerai žinomas energetikos ekspertas, vienoje konferencijoje moterų organizacijų paklaustas, ką reikės daryti su tom panaudotų branduolinio kuro atliekom, labai paprastai atsakė, mes jokio sprendimo šiandien neturim ir labai tikimės, kad mūsų vaikai kažkurioje kartoje tokį sprendimą atras. Žmogus pasakė atvirai ir sąžiningai.
Can I place my question? I have actually two questions. The other one is to Johan Swan. Can we still get him on Skype? Yeah, but yeah, great. The first one is, as I already placed it, it's to you, Linus, because we have this application that has been placed to Swedish nuclear agency SSM and even to the court in Sweden, to environmental court, about SKB's application to build nuclear waste repository. And even in their own assessment of risks, in their scenarios, they clearly show that there can be a major catastrophe in 200 years. There is their official risk assessment, if you see the curves in the conclusions. Then you see that after 200 years, the whole Baltic Sea region can become uninhabitable because of these repositories that will be placed at the very shore on the coast of the Baltic Sea. Okay, but nobody is sort of talking about the repositories, the place. The place is very wrong, and thank you. But thank you to Jan, who really mentioned this, about that these places have been chosen, yeah? So my first question is to get to know what is Lithuania doing? What is the response? Are you in contact with the SKB's process on ESPO convention?
No. Short answer is no.
No contact?
We're not in contact. So far, when we do nothing. We are not able to do everything at once. Maybe the radioactive waste management agency can answer more. Because I represent environmental NGOs, and NGO we do nothing.
Because Lithuania alone could sort of stop the whole process if they said no by ESPO convention.
formaliai kontaktinis taškas yra aplinkos ministerija Lietuvoje. Jie dalyvavo ESPO konvencijoje ir šitą klausimą galėtų iš esmės vienareikšmiškai atsakyti, ar dalyvauja ir kaip dalyvauja tik tai aplinkos ministerija. Mes, konkrečiai aš dirbu radioaktyvių atliekų tvarkymo agentūroje, tai yra organizacija panaši į Švedijos SKB organizaciją. Taigi mes dalyvautume galbūt, jeigu mūsų paprašytų aplinkos ministerija. Kadangi mūsų neprašė, tai ko gero nemano, kad yra reikalinga. Dabar be abejo, neformaliai kitais kanalais mes žinome, mes esame gerai informuoti apie tą projektą, apie tai, kaip buvo parinkta vieta, kokios ten savybės Forsmarke, bet tai yra neformalus bendravimas.
And could you please put on Johan Svan so I could pose my question?
I need to type the question to him and then you put the headphones.
Well, I can hear something about SKB and the ESPO convention.
So he hears me, yeah?
Yeah,
Johan.
Very clearly, very slowly and clearly.
Okay, I will speak clearly. So thank you very much for your presentation. And as we came to Lithuania yesterday, the bank Snoras wasn't working. And I was thinking about this big frame of nuclear waste planning, about this colonization of Baltic Sea region, about the nuclear colonization that we have been discussing on our Baltic Sea Regional Radioactivity Watch. And as the Snoras is bankrupt, Latvian banks are going down, and sort of there are only all the abroad foreign banks that we have to rely on. So the banking system, can we bring it in a bit into the picture as the economy really plays in the all choices? And as I know you, Johan, you have been telling many times to me that you have a father in the United States who works for the World Bank. Have you heard any news? What does your father think about this?
I'm sorry, I cannot hear clearly enough. I'm sorry.
World Bank, what do you think? Has World Bank any interests in the Baltic Sea region, in nuclear operations or nuclear waste?
Okay, I heard you talk about banking and so on. We as far as I know, in the Swedish case, there's little foreign money involved, of course, but certainly in the case of the other countries around the Baltic, there is probably a need for financing, and it would be terrible if any bank would come into this system. But I have not enough information about that. I think Jan knows much more about the banking, how the banking system is financing nuclear issues.
Maybe Jan could pick up a response.
I would like to ask for the last question because we're running out of time. As far as I know, World Bank is not financing any nuclear projects.
I can only confirm that. The World Bank is not financing nuclear and it's unlikely to pick it up.
Any other banks, abroad banks, foreign banks?
If you look at the moment of Visaginas, which is the furthest going nuclear project here in the Baltic region, there was initially some interest from Swedbank to be involved, but because the whole project is at this moment in such a quagmire, okay, there is the construction memorandum of understanding and the contract to be coming, but we are in a very early phase, and at this moment there is no information about interested banks. It is very likely, though, that Hitachi GE, who is going to be responsible for the financing of the Visaginas project, will not look at European banks because they know that European banks are not very interested in these kind of projects for reasons I do not want to go into because that's personal. That they first will look at Japanese and United States banks. We also know that there is an attempt to get a Japanese export credit guarantee and one from the United States Export-Import Bank planned. That means that those applications have not been made yet. We're in a very early phase. And I think at the moment that the finances will come on the table, there will be a tough fight ahead of us.
Okay, probably really the very last questions because we are running out of time and we need to quit. I see no questions, then I would...
Here's a question, okay?
Please,
Right.
last one.
This is the question. The Forschmark repository developed is being reviewed by experts who are chosen by a group of the organizers at SSM to review all of the areas which are outlined in the reports that have been made by the developers. Now the interesting thing here is that the experts who are being chosen are all experts from the nuclear industry, and no experts at all, and I'll say this again, no experts at all are being chosen to review the health effects of these radionuclides. Now these radionuclides are being placed in repositories on the shores of the Baltic Sea, which is already the most contaminated, radioactively contaminated sea in the whole world, with levels of radioactivity as high as 100,000 becquerels per kilogram in the silt of cesium-137. And what evidence we have at the moment is this is already causing health effects in people living along the coast of the Baltic Sea. So could I ask all the experts involved in this issue to put pressure on the developers to choose experts who are independent of the nuclear industry and who have a risk model which is independent of the current risk model which is used to assess the health effects of these substances? Thank you.
Do you want to respond or we could close? CEO wants to respond.
I guess the gentleman here from the Lithuanian Radiation Repository Organization will be using the health model of the International Commission on Radiological Protection, which actually is completely wrong. Is that right?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, my question is, I suppose it's fair to say that you will be, in assessing the health effects of exposure to the substances which are in these repositories, or will be in these repositories in Lithuania, you will assess these health effects on the basis of the current radiation risk model, which is essentially that of the International Commission on Radiological Protection. That is true, yes. And are you aware that there are other risk models which show that this, or a great deal of evidence which show that this risk model of the ICRP is completely wrong? Are you aware?
Well, actually, at my professional level, I don't know other possibilities to demonstrate, to justify safety of the repositories as well as other nuclear facilities. So I just have to use the appropriate, validated methodologies for safety justification and for safety case. Thank you.
On this, I would like to close. You're always welcome to continue discussions in private after the conference, but I would like to give to Tatiana the last word about one thing and very few technical remarks. Tomorrow we are starting at 10 o'clock, at 9:30, and as I mentioned, tomorrow we are meeting in the town hall of the Vilnius municipality, which is on Konstitucijos Street on other side of the river. I hope everybody will find a place. It's kind of in a walking distance from the center. So please don't be late. And we will have very interesting sessions, including effects of radiation on human health and economics of nukes and other things. So we see you here. Last word to Tatiana.
Я прошу прощения, я сделаю важное сообщение, но только по-русски, не по-английски. Надеюсь, что все же от нас не ушли переводчики. На данной конференции планировалось создание резолюции, то есть итогового документа, над которым поработали бы наши уважаемые эксперты, ученые, и к которому присоединились бы по возможности те представители общественности, организаций и политических партий, которые здесь присутствуют. Кроме резолюции, сегодня обсуждалась такая проблема, как то, что в то же самое время, что и наша конференция, в Вильнюсе проходит Совет министров стран ОБСЕ. И у нас есть предложение написать открытое письмо от нашей конференции по одной из ключевых проблем современной безопасности, как в национальном, так и в международном контексте. Такой проблемой, на наш взгляд, является проблема, связанная с ядерной энергетикой. И если есть желающие поучаствовать в работе редакционной комиссии, которая занималась бы резолюцией и которая занималась бы написанием вот этого открытого письма, которое завтра мы бы хотели передать вот этому собранию, Совету министров стран ОБСЕ, то у меня просьба остаться ненадолго для того, чтобы мы могли договориться о формате дальнейшей работы. Спасибо.
Labai ačiū vertėjams už darbą ir už kantrybę. Viso gero. Thank you and goodbye.